When Reverend Joe Jenkins was in his 80s, he memorized large portions of the Bible and set it to music for his sermons. He'd play auto harp and sing or recite the passages. He loved stories such as Jonah and the story of the dry bones. He especially loved the prophets. Joe would continue to preach until age 89. The Jenkins had generously given another lot to the church for $1 when they purchased the brick house next door. In that house, they discovered the original church record book amongst a pile of junk. Lois stayed up all night reading it like a novel.
Let's celebrate the Jenkins era.
When my father, Joe Jenkins, was aging, my son Jesse got up and sang "Jesus Loves Me" as part of a music event. It was his idea to turn and face his grandfather, to sing it directly to him.
Reverend Jenkins helped out with funerals and other ceremonies while our next pastor, Reverend Lynn Larson, came to serve our church. Joe Jenkins died at age 91 in 1993 in Cable. He has left behind a legacy, grown children, Paul, Jim, Janet, and Joe, who continue to share their wonderful voices in the choir today, and numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Hooray for the Jenkins! For 9 years, Reverend Lynn Stewart Larson served as one of the 4 co-pastors for 9 Presbyterian churches in the Solon Springs region. He and his family were ready for a change. Lynn, Jean, Zachary, and Jamila had a dream of finding a home surrounded by forest with land for a large garden. Lynn and Jean desired lots of space for their children to grow up with. They were living in a church-owned home next door to the church in Solon Springs.
After all, Lynn was a farm boy at heart who used to do cartwheels off of bales of hay in the fields of southern Minnesota. He was born in Spring Grove, Minnesota in 1942.
The Larsons had a big paper board in their home in Solon Springs. Every time they walked by it, they drew a picture of something they'd imagined for their dream place. Jamila envisioned a different church for her dad to work in, one with a lively choir. During spring of 1982, Lynn and Jean began the search during a week's vacation. Each day, they ventured out for the day, making wider and wider circles. No luck. On the last day, Lynn stayed home, but Jean kept on searching.
There it was, an empty old farmhouse outside of Cable in long, unmowed grass, dreaming of being a home for a young family. The next day, Lynn and their children accompanied Jean to the house, one of the oldest homesteads in the area. When 9-year-old Jamila saw it, she said, "All right, this is the life for me." The Larsons also discovered there was an 82-year-old pastor planning to retire from the Congregational Church just 3 miles from the farm. On July 6th, they closed on the farm, which was an act of faith, because the next day Lynn did his candidate preaching at the Congregational Church. 13 pastors had applied. The candidates were narrowed down to 3.
Guess who got the job?
When the leaves turned golden and bronze, the Larsons moved into their home with the help of community members such as the McKinneys. Andrew Rasmussen even helped to fix doors that were hanging on their hinges. October 1st, 1982 was Lynn's first day on his new job and his family's first night in the farmhouse. That night, geese flew south overhead. The full moon rose and deer visited their field. He preached his first Sunday at the Cable Church and was officially installed in Cable, Spider Lake, and Delta on November 14th.
Lynn agreed to preach at the Delta Church.
But he convinced Reverend Jenkins to keep preaching at the church in Spider Lake. Reverend Jenkins also helped with funeral services, personalizing the meditations.
People would tell Reverend Larson, "You've got some big shoes to fill." After Joe Jenkins heard that remark, he held up his shoe and said,
They're not so big. They're just size 5.
Lynn and Jean were married in 1967 in France on the way to Algeria. They served for the Board of Missions in Algeria, working for several years. After a frightening adventure of being put in jail and expelled from Algeria, their church mission accused of being engaged in anti-national activities, they returned to the States to study at a Methodist seminary. Jean decided not to continue studying, but Lynn continued, receiving a master's degree, graduating with honors. He was ordained in Northfield, Minnesota in 1973.
The Methodist bishop assigned Lynn to serve a church on the South Dakota border, but they refused to go. They became Presbyterians to serve the church in Solon Springs. After Lynn became a pastor with the UCC Church, he asked the association minister,
"Where's the book?"
After all, the Methodists have a book of discipline, and the Presbyterians have a book of order.
"Where is the book for the UCC Church?"
The association minister said,
We don't have a book. Use your common sense.
"I'm home."
Our church has always had an active music department. Pastor Lynn says,
"Doris and the choir have been exceptional. Doris made it easy for me to come in as a new pastor because she was so cooperative and skillful."
As the season circled, the Larsons turned their house into a home and their garden thrived. So did their children.
Farm animals and a collie named Willow joined their family.
Jean is grateful for the gift this congregation has given her over the years, accepting her as herself.
Lois Jenkins was a tough act to follow, but when the Larsons were in seminary, the role for a pastor's spouse was changing.
No longer is a pastor's spouse expected to work for the church as well.
no more getting 2 for the price of 1.
But Jean has made some positive changes in the church, building the church nursery from the ground up with Shalom Circle, coordinating volunteers for the nursery for 19 years so far,
and helping to create the church Centennial tote bags with the talents of Joanne Collins.
Most of Jean's work has been outside the church in activities in peace, justice, and environmental work. Some of these have been Women's Peace Presence to Stop Project ELF, publishing Seeds of Peace, being one of the founders of the Schwamigan Children's Theater, hosting group solstice gatherings, creating down-to-earth photo cards, and being involved with Citizens Against Expanding ATV Trails. She now works part-time as an allergy nutritionist in Ashland. This September, she'll begin 2 years of graduate studies in human nutrition. She is enrolled in a distance learning degree program from the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut.
Jamila Larson lives in Washington, D.C., and works as the regional coordinator for National Student Partnerships. The organization pairs volunteers from college campuses with street people. The students use their problem solving and research skills to assist people in need to find housing, employment, and child care.
Zachary continues his Tibetan language study at UW in Madison and works full-time in home health care. He works for clients who have both Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. He is saving money to go back to Nepal in a year or two.
We're glad he changed his mind and became our new pastor. Though he was age 40 when he first arrived here, some saw him as an energetic whippersnapper.
We're a slice of their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
There's many seeds of ideas that Lynn helped to plant here. Even with growing pains, the congregation helped him. He was inspired at a workshop in church growth. To build a fellowship hall wasn't just a whim.
We're a slice of their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
We used to have monthly potlucks down in the basement. Then Lynn suggested weekly coffee filled to the brim, needing space for community meetings and young families. Janet helped to dedicate the new hall, and so did Jim.
We're a slice of their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
For the new building projects, Bob Rasmussen was generous. People helped, believing, if you build it, they will come. Once church school was before the service, but Lynn changed that. Now they go to church school after a children's sermon.
We're a slice of their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
Lynn changed the church service to 1 hour earlier with a new 3-act service: prepare, receive, respond. Prepare, open to God. Receive, listen to the word. Respond, go into the world as new disciples.
Their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
New Century hymn books with no these and thous in it. Revised Standard Bibles with the Depta Memorial. Doris Savatsky helped to get the new church organ. No wonder Lynn was tired and needed a sabbatical.
We're a slice of their pie, a part of their dream, a mosaic of tiles got pieced together their scheme.
During Reverend Larson's sabbatical, from October 98 to April 99, Reverend Robert Wilson was the interim pastor. This delightful man won the hearts of the congregation. Oftentimes, lay pastor Glenda Jalowitz now fills in with sermons while Lynn is on vacation.
Church in the valley.
which is still here.
Let's celebrate different parts of our church, starting with the Women's Fellowship. This important group of women was first known as the Ladies' Aid Society. The earliest record is from a meeting on January 13, 1911. The president was Anna Williams, the secretary Mary Foss, and later Mrs. Crandall was elected vice president and Mrs. Berg treasurer. Under Anna Williams' direction, the Ladies' Aid helped promote music and culture in cable schools, donated reading materials and books to the community library. Monthly dues were 5 cents per month, and a total of 90 cents was collected at this meeting. All meetings during these early years and since have begun with a hymn and devotional and ended with the Mizpah benediction and often this statement:
No further business, all to work. Over the years, we've held suppers, socials, sales, educational, musical events, individual and community outreach. We've been the financial and spiritual support of the church. When Charlotte Reynolds was a young girl, she remembers a woman having an argument with the president of the Ladies' Aid.
I still remember the president leaving the meeting because the other women didn't agree with her about something. She marched down the street and the feather on her little hat was waving, but she came back and they patched things up.
Those were the days when women had to wear hats to church. Myron remembers each year there would be some new ridiculous hat in style.
In 1932, dues were 10 cents per month. With the extra money, we purchased 35 chairs for the church for $18.28. We furnished a screen door for the kitchen and remodeled the front steps. In the 1940s, we sang America at the beginning of our meetings. During the war, we turned our collections over to the Commentator newspaper to help defray expenses of sending the paper to the boys in service.
At a meeting on June 18, 1951, someone made the motion to change the name of the Congregational Ladies' Aid to the Christian Women's Fellowship.
I second that motion.
We raise money each year at the country store. In the past, we've supported Sunburst and sometimes a missionary. We help pay for the new carpeting, pay the heating bills, and serve food for families during funerals. Although we are now a small group, we still remain an active presence in our church. We continue to help the church financially with many fundraisers, the purchases of needed equipment, and we continue to foster our own and the church's spiritual growth. Present members are Betty Galloy, Charlotte Reynolds, Pauline Ludwig, Lois Jenkins, Pat Flanders, and not pictured, Inez Anderson, Katie Flowers, Jean Gray, Jeanette Nagel, Janet Porter, Eleanor Stroman, and myself, Carol Elliker. We miss our treasurer of over 20 years, Beverly Amundsen, who died April 1st, year 2000. Hooray for the Women's Fellowship!
Our church has always been known for its talented choir, organists, and special musical events that we've held. Harriet Case was the choir director for many years. In the early days of the church, Mrs. Nellie Toby was the director of the church after moving here from New Richmond. One time, as the congregation was singing Rescue the Perishing, as they sang Care for the Fallen, Mrs. Toby, who was facing the choir directing them, fell back off the platform, landing on her back. Dr. Harmon did indeed care for the fallen, as the congregation, including the embarrassed Mrs. Toby, rocked with laughter.
In the 1920s, the choir subscribed to a monthly choir journal and new voices were added. Relatives of Mrs. Harmon, the Gadds, moved here from the Twin Cities with lovely trained voices. Other early talented singers were Manly Sharp, John Anderson, George and Margaret Warburton, and Grace Crandall. Myron remembers that Mrs. Harmon required the women in the choir to take their earrings off and leave in the church parlor before singing. Lois Jenkins remembers.
Jean Anderson played organ for a long time. So did Alice Neer. And Marion Reed could pump the organ and sing at the same time.
We are grateful for everyone who shares their musical talents with us, especially Doris, who retired but still hasn't fully abandoned us. For many years, the choir sang the hymn, Holy, 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 as the processional each week. One child in our community once referred to our church as the Holy, Holy, Holy Church.
Dear Diana, thank you very much for the pen and ink drawing you did of me as a gift from the church. I must say I like it very much. You didn't draw my wrinkles. Love, Doris.